licensing therapy. Software license therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Software Licensing Therapy, together with me, Ira, and my fantastic pod partner, Taco. Today, we are going to discuss about the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, and everybody is talking about Microsoft Enterprise Agreement disappearing. So, Taco, what do you say? Is the Enterprise Agreement really disappearing?
That's an interesting question, Ira. I would start by using the Swedish expression "ja." What that means is actually yes and no. So it depends. Yes, it's true that Microsoft wants to change contracts from an enterprise agreement structure to the customer agreement enterprise structure or move a customer into the partner network. But even though there is a lot happening in that space, it isn't necessarily so that the enterprise agreement is immediately disappearing. But over time, it most likely will.
All right. So, what would you say? Why is this change happening, and is it a recent change, or what's your experience working on the customer side? What do you see over the past years that has led to this discussion? All in all,
If you look back over time, you can see a structured activity happening where gradually Microsoft is moving away from the original structures where were using partners in between the end customer supporting the enterprise agreement structure, and they have gradually over time taken away the benefits for the partners to facilitate the enterprise agreement, to the extent that many partners feel that they can't deliver those services anymore. If you then add to that when Microsoft came with the cloud offerings, so the M365 offerings or Office 365 offerings, that started in 2018 when they really started to push for enterprises to sign those agreements and move away from perpetual on-premise licensing. Not knowing in which direction it was going, so they signed up for longer term agreements with companies, 3 years, maybe even 5 years agreements. And for companies, that means that they have a reasonable guarantee during the contract period about pricing. So it's predictable. For Microsoft, at the same time, it's also predictable what their revenue is going to be from those agreements. However, with technology changing so fast, it was also locking both Microsoft and customers into certain features, functionalities, and no ability for the vendor in this case to adjust pricing with the evolution of their products. So security on one hand for both parties, but it made it more difficult to evolve with technology during those contractual periods. If you add on top of that they can't change the pricing during a 3 or 5 year period, that usually led to difficult discussions at renewal. So I think from what we've seen in talking to customers that are in that situation where they need to choose, is that I think from both sides, they are asking for more flexibility because corporate structures are changing faster than ever before. So you don't want to be stuck with unused licenses for a very long period of time. So you want to adjust. But with adjustment comes cost effects. So it's a balance, basically.
yeah. Interesting, and I think it's interesting what you're saying, that you've sort of seen this change coming in 2018. When I look back of my years within the software reselling industry, I would say this change started already earlier. I would maybe even go back to like the years 2008, 2009, where yeah, that's a long time ago. We didn't
There we
have
go.
the subscription models and all of that yet. But looking at how Microsoft was paying the partner to support their customer and how that started changing in those years. I mean, uh, I usually say back in the good old days, in the partner segment, we used to have like up to 15% kickback or fees that we got from the contracts. Now we're 20 years 20 years ago, but in 2008 2009, I don't remember exactly when it happened, but Microsoft started going to they decreased the kickback to partners from these 10 to 15 to like 2 or 3%, and there was also a lot more work that needed to be done by the partner together with the customer and documented and actually submitted to Microsoft to be able to get their fees paid. So I would say that was one of the big shifts when many of us started understanding, okay, there is going to be big change. The thing is that um, there was already earlier, I also don't remember anymore the years when that happened, but when Microsoft actually said that they're going to discontinue the enterprise agreement, and there was so much noise around that they sort of had to back off. But we all knew it's going to happen one day or the other. Then again, you were into it a little bit. What does this change mean, and so on? And you came to the you used the word flexibility, which I think is a very interesting word when you look at Microsoft contracts and Microsoft licensing, and I would say licensing, software licensing in general. What is flexibility? Can you elaborate a little bit on that from your
Absolutely, but
perspective?
I just want to take a little step back.
Yeah.
I recall that I was in negotiations for an enterprise agreement for a company I worked for at the time, 2023. And at that time, Microsoft was trying to push us to sign the MCAE. When I started to question that, what happened was that they were not able to answer what the effect was going to be of the MCAE on the requirements that that company had with regards to negotiated amendments to the enterprise agreement, with what was the impact on the Azure consumption, because it required us to sign another contract from Microsoft to cover up the Azure consumption. So the reason that they could not answer, or not the reason that we did not sign that agreement at the time, but continued with the EA structure, was because Microsoft could not explain at the time what their perceived benefits were for us. So that made it very easy for me to kind of push to stay with the existing contract, because that was less legal work to kind of renew the contract.
Yeah.
But when it comes to flexibility, it depends on which side of the table you sit. Because
Obviously.
from a Microsoft perspective, flexibility is often pushed as you can adjust to the volume that you need at the time that you can make your adjustments. But it also means that they don't necessarily talk about if you were to go to the MCAE structure. And that is that if you have those moments where you can adjust, it usually is accompanied with the ability for them to adjust pricing. So that's what, as a flexibility, depends on which side of the table you sit. As a company, if I was to choose for the monthly option that is possible in an MCAE, that would allow me to go up and down with licenses on a monthly basis. So it would give me, as a company, quite a bit of flexibility to adjust my licensing position to my need I have at the moment. But it comes at a premium. So is it worth paying the premium for that type of flexibility instead of having longer periods, maybe a year or even 3 years, where I know what the cost is going to be. So predictable cost. So it's that balance between how many changes do you expect to happen in your organization with regards to people that need to be licensed over a period of time. That will kind of drive, to a certain extent, the level of flexibility you may need in order to adjust. But from a Microsoft perspective, a vendor perspective, obviously, they want to be able to adjust pricing as often as they can, but also they would use the fact that they are embedding new functionality, and that would give you access to that functionality quicker. So it's kind of a balance.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say, because I mean, flexibility sounds really good. I like the word flexibility because that means the choice is mine to make when I need to make it or want to make it. However, what I find interesting also in this context of flexibility that you are also talking about is that when the customer goes into a contract where the flexibility is maximum, so you can actually change number of licenses or type of licenses on a monthly basis even, which is really good flexibility. Well, the pricing may change because then you will always go on a new price list because it's a monthly price list or something. But why do still not only Microsoft, but also other software vendors, they premiere the customers who still commit to a certain amount of licenses and of a certain bundle or something for a year or 3 years that you're talking about. So it's sort of like you give the flexibility, but you still don't premiere the flexibility. Do you understand what I mean? It's like
I understand what you
it's
mean.
strange. What do you think about it?
I think it is very much dependent on the company itself with regards to what are your expectations for the level of flexibility that you need. Obviously, if you commit to longer term contracts, and just as a sidestep, in the old enterprise agreement structure, you had the so-called true-up period or the anniversary in your contract, which would happen every 12 months in principle. At that point, you would be able to adjust your cloud licenses or subscription licenses up or down. But it's only one point in a 12-month period where you could do that, which means that during that period, you may have a volume of unused licenses that you can't get rid of. So you're paying for something you're not using. On the other hand, if you look at the budgeting cycle, you know what you're paying for that period. So it makes it less an administrative burden to handle than if you were to change every month. And I think one thing to consider between having an enterprise agreement structure and a partner in the background that does a lot of the administrative work between you as a customer and the vendor, Microsoft in this case. If you move to the MCAE structure, that partner won't sit in the middle anymore, which means that you, as a company, you will take the burden of the administration, the declaration, handling the licenses. So you would have to have a reasonable, mature process and organization in place to handle that. Obviously, there is a second alternative for me as a customer, and that instead of signing the MCAE directly with Microsoft, I could go to a Microsoft partner and sign a CSP agreement with a partner. So not directly with Microsoft, but through one of their partners.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about the operational part here, because I think that's something that might be forgotten. And also, from what I see, is that many customers, many big enterprises, they've built a process within their organization, how they work this, and it's a quite heavy process, even though it's only one touch point per year, to actually facilitate that entire process within a huge organization, to make sure that you really do the adjustments and just don't continue to pay for something you're not using or similar. But I think it's interesting to get your view from a customer perspective on that specific. So I think it's great. And then looking at the two different options that you have as a customer, and I would say going for the MCAE. With the direct, which is a direct contract with the Microsoft and not having a partner in between, what I really think customers need to consider is, how do you handle the unbiased consulting or the advisory that you have received from your LSP partner or your EA partner, in those years that you've had an enterprise agreement? How do you want to handle that? Yes, Microsoft will obviously support you with the licensing questions and with the contractual questions and with all of that, but sometimes you just need to get a second pair of eyes on things, which is not coming from the vendors. I think that's a very important thing to have a look at as well. How do you want to solve that?
Yeah, there's an interesting angle that you're bringing up at the moment, because if you go back in time, you started in 2008 talking about what the partner actually was getting,
Yeah.
which meant that at the time they could actually do a lot more for you as a customer, because there was
Yeah.
a significant buffer that they were getting to pay for those activities. Over time, as you were alluding to, Microsoft was cutting down that kickback to the partners,
Yeah.
where if you look a year, 3 years back, that percentage wasn't 15% anymore. That was less than 1%, and only for the first year, which meant that the partner in between suddenly needed to change their models, because they, instead of being able to provide you with a license advisory, with other aspects to help you make a choice, they were starting to sell that as an additional service, because they needed to pay for the people. Now, some of them were really good to kind of help you. Others were clearly pushing Microsoft and representing Microsoft in that mix. Now, if you go to the MCAE as an example, the partner isn't in the middle. So you either need to build up your own knowledge base and people with sufficient knowledge about the Microsoft licensing ecosystem in order to have that discussion with Microsoft, or you would need to bring in external competence. And there you have a choice again. What you can do, you can buy that from an existing Microsoft partner. The question is, how unbiased is that going to be? Because obviously they still have a benefit in selling or plugging one of their partners' products. Or you could go into the independent loop, where there are consultants, often smaller niche companies, that provide independent support, and their only goal in principle is to help you as a customer to get the best deal possible and to get the licensing mix that has the best balance between functionality, meeting your internal requirements, and pricing. So you get kind of a more balanced deal.
Yeah. And there are a number of considerations that you need to think about as a customer, because looking at the other option, to choose to go to a partner and go to and sign the CSP agreement and have that, then you will have obviously the flexibility if you don't commit to 1 or 3 years SKUs again. And the partner is but the partner needs to give you a package of support within the CSP contract. So it's not only a license resale. It has to come with a certain type of support to support you as a customer as well. And I think that's a big difference also in looking at the two models, if you want to put it that way. So MCAE is licensing software, the right to use the software. CSP also adds a layer of support, and then you have multiple layers in that support. And then when you have an enterprise agreement, there is a certain amount of Microsoft partners who are eligible to be your partner. Now with CSP, there are tons of them. I think I read a number that there are 900,000 CSP partners globally to choose from. So how to choose the right partner for your needs? Well, that's an interesting
That's an
question as well.
interesting question. But I think if you take the angle between the EA and the MCAE in what would you lose or what would you gain, as an example. So the old enterprise agreement structure, what you would lose into the MCAE is generically aggregated purchasing power, even though there is a possibility under the MCAE to commit for a year or 2 years or 3 years, but it's more a commitment on volume, not necessarily pricing. But in the EA, you have a structured 3-year or 5-year negotiation cycle, which means less burden on you as an organization to go through that. You have price protection, because upfront for the licenses that you put in on day one of that agreement, you know the pricing for the whole period for the licensing that's there. You have a very clear contractual structure, which is not an evergreen model, which allows for amendments and specifics that are very specific for you as an organization. And it would focus on an implicit governance structure. Now, if you were to kind of leave that behind and move to the MCAE, because there are options for more flexibility there, and flexibility we already discussed around what it is, but there is more possibility or agility to scale up and down. We haven't touched upon the fact that gradually you see consumption-based elements popping in the different licenses, which means that it would allow you better alignment to your cloud consumption. Because you have shorter cycles of commitment, the shortest is 1 month, but it also would bring commercial adjustment opportunities quicker for both sides, meaning you can scale down, you can change your licensing or stay with the same, but then the vendor has the option to adjust pricing. So what you gain also is potentially better license hygiene, meaning you always can adjust it to your need at that moment in time. And you don't have to forecast years in advance because you have shorter cycles. So it's going to be a balance of what works for you as an organization. If you have a very traditional organization that is very stable, then probably the flexibility that the MCAE is supposedly giving is not a lot of benefit for you, but it will come at a cost. So it kind of depends.
Yeah. Then again, the question is going to be if you will be allowed to renew your enterprise agreement, or for how long you're going to be able to renew your enterprise agreement. But that we don't know.
We don't know. We've seen some examples where customers were allowed to continue their EA, but for shorter periods. Because ultimately the goal is to kind of have two streams, at least that's my interpretation of what's happening. So you either are a direct Microsoft customer with all the consequences that entails, or you are in the partner network.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, the MCAE is primarily meant for the bigger enterprises to where Microsoft wants to have the
Yes.
direct relationship in a different way. Then again, I just heard that, for example, a public sector where we have indirect enterprise agreements, meaning that there is even a partner invoicing the commit on the enterprise agreement. They are not even touched by this model. So the EA will for sure remain for quite some time because it will still be there as a licensing or as a contractual model. I mean,
Yes, I do
yeah,
agree, particularly if you as an
yeah,
organization have a lot of amendments to your agreement,
yeah,
which don't necessarily translate into the MCAE, which is an evergreen model
mm,
designed to not have all those different differences and changes to the contract.
yeah, yeah.
But there
But
are some very big differences between the two that you need to know about.
yeah,
With regards to you as an organization and the vendor, um, with the enterprise agreement structure, obviously, as we alluded to previously, is that you always have a partner in between that is doing a lot of the administrative work between you and the vendor Microsoft.
mm,
The MCAE, you don't have that. So that cushion is not there. So your
yeah,
relationship is direct. Um, in the partner structure, um, it depends on the partner that you choose. As you were saying that there are potentially 900,000 partners. So what's the right partner for you? So it can be
yeah.
quite challenging to find one that suits you as an organization.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can I just jump in there,
mhm.
Taco? Because I think the part about choosing the partner is something really essential to customers to also consider, because what we see, and I know this from also working at an LSP for many years. I mean, we were quite good in doing these EA to CSP shifts already then, because we knew when the customer EA was up for renewal. We knew that if they were in the good space of doing that, we had the possibility of really comparing the one to the other also for the customer. So it was very easy for us to show the customer when it was a benefit for them and when not. So the LSPs have a really good way of doing that already. But what I would like to actually say to all customers out there who are doing this shift or are looking at this shift from EA to CSP is that start looking also at more non-traditional licensing partners to see and compare them with each other to see where you can actually get the most benefit for your organization. Just if I also look back numbers many years, we sometimes had the challenge when we were the licensing partner and the customer had a technical partner who were doing more of the support and all of those things. It was sometimes a little bit of a mismatch between what we as the licensing partner said and what the more technical partner said. And I think to be able to combine those two competencies in the best possible way for your company is really essential. Um, if you choose to go, or if you have to go down the CSP route and through a partner. So think
Yes,
about that.
I would kind of say if you take one big takeaway in a decision, what route is potentially the best for you as a customer, it
Eh,
is about how mature are your internal processes with regards to handling the type of activities that the partner previously handled for you.
eh, eh,
And how much knowledge do you have in your organization to be a direct counterpart towards Microsoft with regards to licensing knowledge? Or do you want to fully depend on the vendor to give you that advice in what to do and how to do? If you choose that path, you need to be mature in your software asset management function. You need to have knowledge, or you would need to procure that separately to support you.
eh.
Otherwise, I think it's going to be challenging for you to handle that direct relationship with Microsoft with regards to the operational side, but also the administrative side.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think also in this comparison between MCAE and CSP, we've listed a couple of other things, and what I believe is really interesting is about the pricing transparency. So would you like to elaborate a little bit around your view on these two when you compare them to each other?
That's interesting, because you asked about what's flexibility, then I ask what's transparency.
Exactly.
If you are in a partner relationship, then the partner is forced by Microsoft to deliver you certain services as part of being the partner to you. That means that they will always add a margin on top of the pricing that the partner gets from Microsoft. Now, that also opens up for the partner to wrap in other services that they say they will deliver to you, but you don't know the real cost of those services. So in the partner situation, if you want to have transparency, you need to be very clear in what you expect to be calculated into the license pricing, and what do you want to see as a separate price item on the offer that they're going to give you. Now you can say, is Microsoft pricing transparent? Difficult to say, because you have list pricing and you have list pricing now, because they took away all the discount capabilities that were previously in the enterprise agreement with level A, B, C, and D discounts. So it becomes a negotiation with a potential certain percent of discount on the list price that you may achieve. And I would highlight may achieve, because it's not necessarily guaranteed that you would get that. So transparency, both sides, you kind of know what roughly the starting point is, but what you get, I think that's the difficult question to say, well, is it transparent or not? It's the same as flexibility.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think looking at the partner perspective, I mean, yes, there is a margin, but everybody has the same price from Microsoft, and then there are different elements to it. There are kickbacks and these elements, rebates, and things like that you can get depending on the product bundling or whatever it might be. But of course, there is this margin that you add on top as a partner, and that can be different. But I want to come back to the conversation we had just some minutes ago about really making sure that you, when you go the CSP route, make sure that you are you understand what your need is from the partner, because then it might be more of a value for you to pay a little bit of a higher price on the CSP license itself, because you will, you know that you will have savings within the entire organization, and you will get a better value for your users. So out of obvious reasons.
So if I want to circle back to where we started, if that's something that's okay with you, it's like you asked, is the EA disappearing or not?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's still an interesting question, because throughout our discussion, we've seen, yes, there is definitely an indication that that's the route that Microsoft wants to go. There are examples right now, like you talked about, more the public offering, where the EA structure still seems to continue. We've seen customers that were up for renewal for certain parts that were allowed to stick with the enterprise agreement. At the same time, we've seen customers who were forced to move either to a partner or to the MCAE. So yes, I think you still have leverage as a customer, depending on what the contract looks like today, to push for a certain direction. The question is, how flexible is the vendor going to be to accommodate that for you? And you may end up in a situation where you're not even being offered that opportunity. It is the MCAE that is directly on the table. And then you need to be prepared. So in the end, if your EA is up for renewal in the next 12 months, you need to prepare. You need to look at the options by either taking in an external party to help you with that, or with your own internal organization, evaluate the partner option, evaluate the MCAE, and make a balanced decision on what you believe is the best direction for you, based on what we discussed in over the last kind of 30 minutes about flexibility, about is your organization ready to take on that administrative side and that governance side with the knowledge you need. And if you tick all those boxes, the MCA might be the right option for you, because there are benefits in that structure as well. It's not that it's particularly bad compared to the EA. They have different pros and cons, but you need to be aware of what it is, and you need to make a conscious decision which direction you want to go.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, being prepared for a contract renewal is key to making the right decision. That's stating the obvious. I would say to the question, is the EA disappearing? I would say no, it's not, because it will still be there for many, many years. On the other hand, the EA or the enterprise agreement as a name for a contractual for a contract with Microsoft is disappearing over time, and it has been doing so for a long time. So it's a change in how Microsoft wants you to act within their framework. But I mean, we're still talking about the same things. It's talking directly to Microsoft or talking through a partner. It's still buying the license, the software. It's still about the bundles. It's still about you needing to know what do you need, when do you need, how much do you need it, and how well you manage your organization. So
Exactly.
it's a no.
What do they say?
I would
Same,
say.
but different.
Yes, that's a very good. That's a very good ending to our episode about is the Microsoft EA disappearing? It's same, but different.
Yes.
So yeah, exactly. So thank you very much for this conversation,
Yeah,
Taco.
thank you, Ira.
It's a pleasure as always,
Absolutely.
and looking forward to our next topic shortly. So thanks
Thank
and
you.
goodbye.
And goodbye. Bye.
Bye bye.